It was close to midnight at the Inter-Miami training facility. The last lights flickered off in the gym, the sound of footsteps and voices had long disappeared, and only the hum of electric fences and distant freeway echoes remained. David Beckham, co-owner and the face of the club, had just finished a late meeting with the coaching staff. Everyone else had gone home. He walked toward his sleek black SUV, keys dangling in hand, eyes heavy with fatigue. It was just another long day in the life of a football executive: contracts, press commitments, tactical reviews. But as he approached the far end of the parking lot, something caught his attention. A faint, flickering light, coming from the inside of an old, rusty delivery van parked near the outer fence. At first, he thought it might be a maintenance crew member wrapping up. But as he got closer, the scene that unfolded stopped him in his tracks. Through the smudged window of the van, he saw a man, middle-aged, slouched, wrapped in what looked like a janitor's jacket. Inside the cramped vehicle, a small camping lantern dimly lit the space, casting shadows on a makeshift bedding of old blankets, plastic bags, and what looked like a folded Inter-Miami hoodie used as a pillow. The man appeared to be asleep, curled into himself, his back pressed against the cold metal wall of the van. Beckham stood motionless. A strange silence filled the air around him. He had seen poverty in his life, growing up in Leytonstone, visiting orphanages as a UNICEF ambassador, but something about this hit differently. This wasn't a street or a distant village. This was his club, his facility. And this man was clearly living, sleeping, in the Inter-Miami parking lot. He didn't knock. He didn't wake the man. Instead, Beckham slowly walked back to his car, started the engine, and drove home, eyes darting to the rearview mirror more times than he could count. That night, lying beside Victoria in their Miami Beach home, he couldn't sleep. The image kept coming back. The hunched figure, the worn-out van, the silence. It wasn't just sadness that stirred inside him. It was shame. How could this be happening under my watch? The next morning, Beckham arrived at the training ground early, unusually early. He parked at the same far end, hoping to see the van again. It was gone. But a trail of tire marks on the dirt shoulder showed it had left just moments before. As the staff started to arrive, Beckham casually began asking questions. Who handles late-night cleanups? Anyone doing maintenance overnight? Eventually, a groundskeeper named Luis pulled him aside and whispered, "You're talking about Samuel, right? Older guy, works overnight, barely says a word. Cleans the locker rooms, restocks the laundry, scrubs the showers. Comes and goes like a ghost. Real humble. Real quiet." Beckham asked to see the staff log. There it was. Samuel M. Janitorial crew, part-time contract, assigned to night shift only. No emergency contact listed. No address on file, just a P.O. box. No vehicle registration in the staff log. Beckham felt a chill. He's living in that van, isn't he? Instead of confronting him directly, Beckham began observing. Over the next few nights, he stayed late after meetings, always parking near the outer lot. And without fail, just as the facility went dark, the same van would pull in, and Samuel would climb into the back quietly, unseen. Beckham never approached. He just watched. And what he saw was a man who had mastered the art of disappearing. No complaints. No asking for help. Just silence. But what shook Beckham the most wasn't the sleeping arrangements. It was Samuel's routine. Each night, he would sit on the bumper of the van and unwrap a simple meal. A boiled egg, a sandwich in foil, maybe a banana. He would look at his food not with joy, but with focus, like it was fuel, not pleasure. One night, Beckham noticed Samuel take out a worn photograph from his coat pocket. He held it in his hands for a long time, then tucked it away. The next day, Beckham found that same photo in the trash near the van's parking spot. He picked it up. It was crumpled, faded. But it showed a younger Samuel, beaming, next to a teenage boy in a high school soccer uniform, jersey number 10. That afternoon, Beckham couldn't focus on meetings. His mind kept circling around Samuel. He tried to justify it. He's not asking for help. Maybe he's okay. Maybe this is just temporary. But deep down, Beckham knew that line of thinking was cowardice. He had the power to act. The question was how. Later that evening, as players were finishing training and staff began to clear out, Beckham walked the halls alone. On a hunch, he took the elevator down to the lower locker room hallway. There he saw Samuel, kneeling by the tiled floor, scrubbing with a steel brush, his movements slow but precise. Beckham hesitated. Then he spoke. "Evening," he said softly. Samuel looked up, startled but composed. "Good evening, sir. You've been working here a long time, haven't you?" Samuel nodded. "I've been around. Do what needs to be done." There was no resentment in his voice. No plea. Just matter-of-fact resilience. Beckham stepped closer. "Can I ask, why do you sleep in the van?" Samuel's eyes didn't flinch. "It's just temporary. Until I get things straightened out. No trouble, I promise." Beckham crouched down beside him, not as a boss, not as a billionaire, but as a man. "You're not in trouble, Samuel. I want to understand. That's all." Samuel looked at the floor, paused, then finally said, "I lost my son last year. He was 15. Got caught in a crossfire outside a corner store. We were saving up for a better apartment. After he passed, I couldn't stay in that place. Too many memories. The van's quieter." Beckham said nothing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A weight settled between them. That night, as Beckham left the facility, he sat in his car for a long time. The city lights of Miami shimmered in the distance. He thought about his own children, their laughter, their safety, their home. He realized then that football, fame, and fortune had brought him many things, but this moment, this man had given him something rare: perspective. And in that moment, Beckham made a promise, not out loud, not for the cameras, but to himself: "I will not let this man sleep in a van one more night. Not while I have the power to change it." David Beckham wasn't a man who made empty promises. That night, as he drove away from the Inter Miami facility, his mind was no longer clouded with doubt. It was sharp, clear, focused. The face of Samuel, and the pain buried behind those quiet eyes, had carved itself into Beckham's memory like a scar. And that photograph, the one with the boy in the number 10 jersey, that had stuck with him too. The next morning, Beckham called a trusted aide. Not someone from the PR team. Not from the club's operations. A man named Marcus, an ex-journalist turned private community outreach coordinator Beckham had met years ago in LA. Marcus had one skill Beckham needed now. He could find stories hiding in plain sight. "I need you to help me understand this man's life," Beckham told him. "Quietly. No one at the club can know. His name's Samuel M., janitor at Inter Miami. That's all I've got. But I need to know who he is and what happened to his son." Over the following days, Beckham played it cool. At the training ground, he greeted players, took sponsor calls, smiled for photos. But his heart was elsewhere. Every night before going home, he'd pass by the lot. Samuel's van always returned, like clockwork, sliding into the corner spot just beyond the fence. Beckham never approached again. Not yet. He waited for Marcus. 3 days later, Marcus called back. "It's not a simple story," he said. "Samuel Mitchell. Born in Liberty City, raised by a single mother. Played semi-pro ball in his 20s but gave it up when his mom got sick. Married young. Wife passed from cancer 5 years ago. One son, Jalen. Kid was bright. Real bright. Played soccer, ran track. Straight A student. But wrong place, wrong time. Shot outside a bodega after school. Gang crossfire. No one ever caught." Beckham felt like someone had knocked the air out of his chest. "He lost everything in a year," Marcus continued. "His lease, his savings, his kid. But he didn't break. He took whatever work he could find. Janitorial contracts. Some nights he worked 2 shifts back to back. That van? He's lived in it for 14 months. Never asked for help." Beckham sat in silence, gripping the edge of his desk. The tragedy was staggering. But what hit hardest was the dignity Samuel had maintained through it all. He wasn't some helpless man waiting to be saved. He was a father still trying to live with purpose in a world that had taken everything from him. That night, Beckham didn't go home. He stayed at the facility long after the players had left. And around 11:30 p.m., he walked out to the far lot. Samuel was sitting on the ground, legs stretched out, eating a cup of instant noodles with a plastic fork. Beckham approached quietly. "Evening," he said again. Samuel looked up. "Mr. Beckham. Just David, please." There was a pause. Then Beckham sat down beside him on the curb, their backs against the cold chain-link fence. "I found the photo," Beckham said slowly. "Your son. Jalen, right?" Samuel stared ahead. "Yeah. He looked like a good kid. He was. Better than I ever was." There was a long silence, the kind that only happens between two people who no longer need to fill it with words. Then Beckham spoke again. "You said it's temporary living like this. But it's been over a year, hasn't it?" Samuel gave a tired smile. "I don't keep track. Days blur together after a while." Beckham reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a lease agreement," he said, "for a small apartment in Little Havana. 2 bedrooms. Paid for the next 18 months. Utilities included. I also talked to the club quietly. You'll be full-time with benefits and better hours. Still want to work nights? No problem. But no more sleeping in a van, Samuel. The janitor didn't say a word. He didn't move. Just stared ahead, blinking hard. I'm not trying to insult your pride, Beckham added. I know what dignity looks like. I saw it the first time I watched you scrub those locker rooms like they were your own kitchen. This isn't charity. It's respect. Samuel finally turned to him, voice cracking. Why me? Why would a man like you care about a man like me? Beckham looked him in the eye. Because I've got 4 kids. And if something ever happened to any of them, I'd want the world to treat me with the same grace you carry every single day. Tears welled in Samuel's eyes, but he turned away quickly, embarrassed. Beckham didn't push. He just sat there, quiet, present, human. The next morning, Samuel didn't sleep in the van. Instead, he followed Beckham's driver to the apartment. Modest, clean, furnished. The fridge was stocked, and on the kitchen counter sat a photo frame. The same photo of Samuel and Jalen, reprinted, restored, placed beside a small note handwritten by Beckham. This is not a gift. This is a beginning. From that day forward, Beckham made a quiet habit. Every Friday morning before training, he would walk the facility with a cup of coffee in hand and stop by wherever Samuel was working. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. But the ritual became part of their rhythm. One day, Beckham found Samuel sketching on the back of an old clipboard, designs of a soccer field. Lines, drills, formations. What's this? He asked. Samuel smiled sheepishly. Just stuff I used to draw for Jalen. He wanted to be a coach someday. Said I'd be his assistant. That sparked an idea. The following week, Beckham arranged for Samuel to attend weekend youth training sessions at the Inter-Miami Academy, not as a janitor, but as an observer. Just to watch, offer advice. It started with small things, setting up cones, passing water bottles. But the kids liked him. They listened when he spoke. They called him Coach Sam. Beckham watched from a distance. The man who once slept in a van was now standing on the sideline, whistling drills, nodding with encouragement, talking tactics with 13-year-olds like it was second nature. It was never about pity. It was about seeing someone's worth before the world demanded you see it. In the months that followed, Samuel remained a humble staff member, but with a new title, Community Engagement Coach. Beckham never announced it. There were no press releases, no photos on social media. Because this wasn't for headlines. It was for healing. And Samuel wasn't the only one changed by this. Beckham found himself re-evaluating everything, how the club treated its staff, what support systems were really in place, how many Samuels might be slipping through the cracks, invisible. He began sitting in on HR meetings, asking deeper questions. He pushed for housing stipends, mental health services, emergency grants for low-wage employees. Quiet changes, real changes. And every time he walked through the training ground now, he wasn't just looking for rising stars on the pitch. He was watching the sidelines, the locker rooms, the shadows, looking for the invisible stories. Because sometimes the most important goal isn't scored in front of thousands. Sometimes, it's scored in the silence of a parking lot, beside a man who never asked to be seen, but who deserved to be. Months passed. Inter-Miami season rolled on with its usual highs and lows. But behind the scenes, something deeper had begun to change. It wasn't about match results anymore. It was about people, about dignity, second chances, and what it meant to be seen. Samuel, now Coach Sam to the Academy kids, had become a quiet staple of the club. He still did maintenance work a few nights a week, he insisted on it. Said it kept him grounded. But he also led Saturday training drills for the youth team. And every once in a while, you'd catch him on the bench during reserve matches, clipboard in hand, eyes focused not on tactics, but on effort, attitude, and heart. One evening after practice, Beckham stayed behind longer than usual. The sun dipped behind the palm trees, casting long golden streaks across the pitch. As he walked through the tunnel toward the parking lot, he spotted Samuel alone, sweeping out the side entrance near the youth locker rooms. Not as a janitor, just helping. "Hey Sam," Beckham called out. "You've got a minute?" Samuel leaned on the broom, wiped sweat from his brow. "Sure." They walked together toward the far end of the training ground. Beckham motioned for him to sit. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Beckham pulled a folder from his satchel. "There's something I want to ask you," he said, opening it. "We're launching a new program, community mentorship for youth in underserved neighborhoods. Real mentorship. Soccer, yes, but also life skills, education, mental health. We're calling it Second Half. Because for a lot of these kids, Their lives don't start with perfect fields or private coaches. They start on the back foot. We want to help them win their second half. Samuel listened carefully, nodding slowly. I want you to be one of the founding mentors, Beckham continued. Lead workshops. Share your story. Not just about tragedy, but survival, resilience, quiet strength. Samuel blinked, processing. I'm not a speaker, David. I don't have the words like you do. You don't need them, Beckham said. You've lived the story. That's what matters. They don't need a celebrity. They need someone who stood in their shoes. There was a long silence. Then Samuel nodded just once. I'll do it. The second half program launched quietly, without a flashy press conference. That was Beckham's request. It wasn't for headlines. It was for the kids. And in its first month, nearly 60 teenagers from Miami-Dade County signed up. Some had never even touched a soccer ball. Others had dropped out of school, battling anger, loss, or homelessness. Coach Sam became a central figure. He didn't preach. He didn't tell them what to do. He listened. And then, slowly, he guided. He'd tell the story of Jalen, but not as a tragedy. He framed it as a call to action. Life can take from you, he'd say, but don't let it take who you are. That's yours. Hold it close. He told them about the nights sleeping in his van, the noodles, the cold. But he always ended the story with one simple line. And still, I showed up. The kids listened. More importantly, they came back. One afternoon, after a mentorship session, Beckham stood quietly in the back of the room. He watched as a 16-year-old girl who hadn't spoken a word in weeks raised her hand and shared her dream of becoming a sports therapist. Watched a boy, barely 14, hug Samuel after admitting his brother had just been arrested. Beckham felt something shift in his chest. This was bigger than football. The final moment came one night after a home match. Inter Miami had just pulled off a gritty win, and Beckham, as usual, was doing the rounds in the stadium hallway. The crowd had mostly cleared. But near the edge of the field, a man stood waiting, holding a small envelope. It was Samuel. He handed it to Beckham, looking nervous. I need you to read this when you get home, he said. It's not urgent, but it's important. That night, Beckham sat on the couch, glass of water in hand, and opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The writing wasn't perfect. Samuel had never cared for fancy words, but it was raw, honest, and unforgettable. David, you saw me when no one else did. Not because of pity, but because of respect. You reminded me I was more than a janitor or a broken man. You reminded me I was still a father, still a teacher, still human. Jalen would have been 18 this year. I used to dream about the day he'd graduate, how I'd be in the stands, yelling too loud and embarrassing him. That day never came. But now I get to stand beside other kids. I get to yell too loud for them. I get to build something that gives them a shot. And it's because you made me believe I was still worthy of building anything. I hope I've made you proud. Not just for sweeping floors, but for showing up, for keeping my promise, and for helping others play their second half. Thank you, Samuel. Beckham didn't cry easily, but that night he did. Not out of sadness, but out of recognition. This was the real victory. Not the trophies, not the brands, not the stadiums. It was the quiet redemption of one man who had been written off by the world, but not by himself, not by Beckham, and not by the kids who now called him coach. Years from now, when people would talk about Beckham's legacy in American soccer, most would remember Messi, or Inter Miami's rise, or the business deals. But a few, just a few, would remember a man named Samuel, and the quiet promise between two fathers.